This week was Father's Day in the US. I learned living in Australia that Father's Day is months later there, but Mother's Day is the same. Fun fact. But in a post, I talked about how many employers put out messages of Happy Father's Day. They say it to customers, the public, even internally to employees. But many of those same employers ignore the tool that they have that deeply impacts the type of father that their male parent employees can be. In this week's video, I'll talk about that tool, because that's managers. And it's not just the type of father that employees can be. It's also the type of mother, or partner, or friend, or child, or sibling. Any of those things, even the person that those people are to themselves. Because managers have a far deeper impact, and that ripple goes on long after employees walk out of the work site, leave the office, shut down their computer. Those ripple effects last for a long time. So starting out, I want you to close your eyes. I can't see if you're doing it, but I'll do it. Now think about a time that you were at work. It may be recent times, it may be a long time ago, but think about a time that your manager took something out on you. They yelled, or they made a comment, or you felt surprised by a performance review. Those types of things where you felt out of control. How did you feel? You may have words like frustrated, angry. You may feel in the grip, that coming back to you. Now, I don't want that to last. So that's not happening now, hopefully. But in those moments, when employees feel incredibly frustrated, what do we often tend to do? Sometimes it's controlling what you can control. So, okay, I can't control this situation, so I'm going to do something to someone else. And I may take that emotion that my manager had, lashing out at me. And those people may go and take that out on the people that they love most. There's an expression, hurt people hurt people. What that means is that when people go through, pain and stress, or worse, they often learn those behaviors, and in as much as they don't want to do it themselves, it's part of the behavior they learn. And that can happen in the workplace. When you have employees that feel like they're treated terribly, it can impact their self-esteem. And so if they go home, they may take that out on their children, getting frustrated. Because when they're walking in the door and they have that frustrated mindset, oftentimes that fuse becomes very short. So the smallest things, a shoe tripping over as you walk in, or bad manners at the dinner table, or just general frustration can come out. Okay, but what about good managers? Did they have a strong ripple effect? And I think absolutely. Now I'm going to have you close your eyes again. Now think of a time that you were at work and you felt like your boss really respected you. They talked well of you, or you got feedback, or you got an email of something that really made you feel good about yourself. Not just the work you did, but overall. I think about when I was leaving a job, we were moving to another state. And my boss said on the last day, I will miss working with you every day. And I still think about those words years later. And I think about the things that we did at work as well. Some of the work that we did, but more often the fun times that we had. So I've been a lawyer, I've done HR, and so a lot of times that's working in subjects that are tough. But so the best workplaces I've had have been ones where we found some light moments. Watch a YouTube, have a laugh, chat, ask about each other's families. And so those type of moments can have those ripple effects. Because also in that role, there were certain boundaries. Like, I expect you to work during these hours. As a lawyer, that's not super common. In a lot of roles, you don't have those. And people pick and choose what matters to them. But at that point in my life, when I was in that role, the ability to truly shut down my work, I only had a desktop computer to start. And that was a huge deal because that was the first time in a long time. But the ability for me to come to work, do work, focus, and then go home and have it separate and not have the two mix as much, for me, that was exactly what I needed at that point in time. So when I think about that, in my boss, proactively setting that boundary, and also the kind words such that when I left, my boss said I'd miss things every day. I think about that because when I talk to my kids about jobs, I'd say, I'd tell them some story of things from work or the person I was when I came home because I wasn't stressed or thinking, I'm going to crack open my laptop like I have every night for the last several months. I was able to shut that down. That was something that mattered to me. And it was my boss that set the tone. And so these two examples, when you feel like you're in the grip and that boss has made you feel that way, and thinking about how you can take that out on the people that really matter the most. And people don't want to do that, but often it's that human reaction. And then the converse, when you're in a good situation and you have a boss that you feel like you're treated with respect, autonomy, you have a sense of what's going on, those type of feelings can absolutely impact the type of person you can be. To the Father's Day point, they can impact the type of father you can be. But like anything, like I say, a parent, a friend. As an example, I talk about going on vacation. Now, one of the best things about going on vacation 20, 30 years ago, when I was a lot younger, was that my parents didn't have cell phones. So we'd go on vacation and my parents didn't work. So we'd go and we'd have memories and we'd be out there and nobody would be sitting on the beach just scrolling on their cell phone. We'd all be present. Nowadays, it can be a lot more challenging. So I've been on vacation. I've been on vacation myself and had to run back to the house to work on an email. Or I've sat there and gotten that email and it pings in you where you think, oh, even though I did everything to set myself up for vacation, I saw this notification because I kept my work email on, and now this is going to totally impact my whole day. And so managers can often set that tone because now, more than it was 30 years ago when people really had that physical separation, or even less ago, it wasn't even just 30 years ago, but now it's really important for managers to do things to kind of set that tone. Because some employees have been working or with their personality, they're able to say, I'm going to go on vacation, I'm going to turn off my work email, and I'm fine. But more employees than I think act the other way. More employees often feel this pressure, and so they keep their work email on. And those employees sometimes will get that notification and just feel stressed. And so if you're a manager, what are things that you can do to help in that situation and help the person that your employees can be, both inside and outside of work? I'll talk about 3 quick scenarios. And each one of these falls under my formula. That's a 2-part formula. And that's say it and do it. And what that means is to proactively tell employees what's expected of them and then follow through to make sure that your actions meet those words. Now, a 2-part formula of say it and do it sounds super simple. But as I talk to organizations, often it's just not done. In part, the say it, which is really proactively telling employees what you expect, isn't done in part because many managers say, well, if people have questions, they'll come to me. And I don't want people to get tired of hearing from me. But in the most recent issue of Harvard Business Review, there was a short column that talked about a study that said that's exactly what managers fear, this idea of over-communication. But the study bore out that far more often, employees feel like they don't hear enough. And so the emphasis is really that managers need to communicate. I tell that all the time to managers. If you proactively communicate, your employees, it will absolutely make a difference. And they are hearing from you far less than you might feel like they are. So we'll talk about this in 3 ways. So one is this time off that I talked about. The idea of say it and do it. So a lot of employees, as they get ready for time off, like especially a vacation, where it's a few days, few weeks, when they're taking that time off, many times they have questions of what's the expectation. And so as a manager, and I say this at times, in the interview process, telling employees or candidates proactively what you expect. So if employees are expected to be on work email, or it's fine for them to take it off, but have a text message in case you have a question. Because every once in a while, something may come up and you literally just need to ask someone, hey, for some information. But just being wary of making sure that those quick questions, that's something you literally can't find, how is that going to impact the employee that's trying to have this vacation? And so as a manager, visualizing and thinking about that employee on the beach, playing with their family or hanging with their friends, or even just being by themselves. And is that quick question really needed at that point in time, or can it wait a few days? Oftentimes, we feel like we need the information immediately. And sometimes that's true. Sometimes it's not. So thinking about hesitating before you respond out, but talking to employees about what that expectation is, so they're not having to come and ask you. Because as an employee, I can really think of hardly any time that any boss, even great ones, have said, hey, this is the expectation when you're on time off, and these are the things that you can do so you can actually recharge. And you're starting to see that happen more often, and employees really appreciate it. This idea of saying it, painting it proactively, and then the do it. This is the much harder part. It's easier to tell people how things are going to be. It's harder to do it. But so helping employees to strategize. And sometimes people are like, oh, it's fine, I have people to cover. And it can be easier if you're on a team of multiple people. That's been an environment that I really enjoyed. When I had a colleague where we could do similar duties, so we could literally fill in for each other when we had time off. So we could actually not take our laptops, shut things down. It was amazing. But you may have employees that are teams of one, or in their role, they're the only person. So talking to them to strategize behind that. What is it? Can you help answer things? Are there other colleagues that could chime in for a bit? Can you just tee up other cross-functional colleagues around the company or around the organization to let them know it's going to be a delay? But helping to set that in motion, because it can be really hard for employees, especially in that power imbalance, if they work with people that are more senior to them. So this is the idea of saying it and doing it, of telling employees what the expectation is, and then helping to have things to set them up. So, for example, if employees are in an office type environment, encouraging employees, hey, when you get back, block out your calendar for that next day back so you can catch up on things, so you're not jumping back into a bunch of meetings. So painting things like that employees can do to actually enjoy their time off and come back and ease back in. Those are things that you can do as a manager. So what are others? So for shift-based work, so things like restaurants, retail environments, even healthcare times, you may have shift-based work. So for the say it and do it aspect, it can be talking about what those shifts look like. Is it going to be a predictable shift? Is it going to be varying? And if someone has a shift and they can't work that, how do they cover that off? Are they responsible for finding a replacement? That can be really hard to do in practice. So that's generally something that can drive people out the door if they have a hard time, if they're sick and then expected to find a replacement. It's generally a don't in my book. But this idea of say it and do it, so talking to employees about their schedule. How is that going to look? Things like requesting. If they're newer, is there a seniority-based system? But being clear with employees and being proactive about what that looks like so that they have certainty. And then the do it aspect. Again, it can be really hard to build shifts and have them to be equitable, but following through with that. So giving people the predictability as much as possible, that can help to build long-term valued employees. And if employees have things, what can you do to help to find others? Build systems in to find replacements. So it's not just, hey, employee, you find it, especially if someone's sick, which can often be the reason that they'd be out at the last minute. So having those systems can be really helpful in the shift base. Because again, thinking about the person that employee is, how is that employee going to talk about you at the dinner table? If they're not feeling well and they're there dialing and texting around and trying to find someone who's going to fill that shift. Those impacts and things that you can do as a manager to help them out can absolutely impact who they are and how long they want to stay and how they want to work at your organization. So that's another power with shift-based work. The last applies in any environment, and that's when employees make mistakes. So the mistakes can often feel really difficult for employees. There's many people who beat themselves up no matter what happens. But the idea of say it and do it is as you're talking to employees, and this is really as employees get started, is to be talking about when they make a mistake and recognizing that it's going to happen. Because that tends to happen to us all as humans when we're learning something new or maybe we have too much on our plates. And so talking to employees to say, hey, when something happens, we want to minimize it as much as possible, minimize the times that happen. But when they do, this is what you should do. Reach out to me. And you can say, we've all had that pit in our stomach, but I don't want you to come to work and be afraid of telling me that you're human. So that can be the say it idea. The harder is the do it. Because when an employee makes a mistake, it may be something really minor. It may be something that's going to take a lot of effort to clean up. So that's where the challenge can come into. And that's where it is so important for you to follow through on the do it. So sometimes you may need to take a breath and say, okay, we got to figure this out. But we will. We will. And I appreciate you telling me, and we'll figure it out together. But the last thing I want is for you to come and feel like you making a mistake at work impacts the person that you are. And so by saying something like that, you may bide time to think about, okay, let me think about how we're going to figure this out in helping that employee. Because there's going to be times that you're going to mess up as well, and your employees are going to be there for you. And so as a manager, knowing that that employee is probably already frustrated enough at themselves, and sometimes they may take that out. If they feel continued frustration or like they're in trouble at work, they may take that into the rest of their life as they're driving, cutting off traffic, when they get home, who they are. But if you show them that kind of understanding and talk about it to make sure that it doesn't repeat itself, that can be absolutely a message that sticks with that employee and that they take with them for the rest of their career. And as they rise into management, the type of manager they want to be. So this video has been one to talk about the power of managers. And I know it can be really overwhelming as a manager to think, how can I keep everything in check, all my employees, and my own emotions? But often it's taking a breath and having those systems and saying, okay, say it and do it. I'm going to communicate to employees. And when you're in the moment, when you're in the grip, taking a breath and remembering that things will be okay. They will work out in whatever fashion. But just remembering how you react in any situation can impact not just how the mistake or whatever gets fixed, but also what happens and who that employee is, how their family talks about you at the dinner table, whether they talk about you as that good boss, or whether they look at you and think you're this source of frustration. You do have the power to choose how you act in those situations, and it's really important, and it's a key role that people take with them. So, as you've thought about those different situations of when you've been stressed or you've had that great manager, I encourage you to think about both and think about how you can integrate those choices in your career and think about how you can impact employees and be that type of manager that they're thinking about when they close their eyes and that you made the impact to make them feel like they could perform.